Chapter 61. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Business Dinner Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. At night, the Lawrences sat in the dining room and had dinner. Jeremy and his family were forcibly chased away by Jennifer. When they left, they cried their hearts out. They said that Jennifer did not care about their lives anymore, which made Jennifer feel very awkward in front of all the servants. Naturally, the matter did not end well. Nonetheless, Jennifer was still smart. Before Alexander came back from work, she had already dealt with everything that needed to be dealt with. At this moment, there were not many people at the dining table. Jasmine had also become a swan. "What's going on with George?" Alexander suddenly asked seriously. Jean raised her head and looked at Alexander. "What do you mean?" "The interview for elementary school today." Alexander's expression was very ugly. "Today, countless people called to congratulate me, saying that I have a genius grandson. After so long, I still don't know anything." "Did you ask?" Jean sneered. "Do you have to go against me?" Alexander suddenly put down his cutleries. The atmosphere became very serious. Bvec Jennifer and Joshua did not dare to move their cutleries. On the other hand, Jean was very calm as she took some food for George. After all, George needed to grow. "Jean." Alexander saw that Jean ignored him, so his expression became even uglier. Jean said nonchalantly, "It's not a big deal. He's just a little smarter than the average person. What's there to talk about?" "You." Alexander was speechless by Jean's words. "Let's eat. If the food gets cold, they won't taste good." Jennifer was the best at acting as a good person. When she knew that Alexander was feeling a little awkward at this moment, she quickly eased the atmosphere. She took some food and placed it on Alexander's plate. "You're tired after working all day. Eat more." Alexander glared at Jean and turned to ask Jennifer, "How's Paul?" "That child didn't perform well and wasn't selected," Jennifer said nonchalantly. "It's also because he hasn't seen much of the world since he was young. Thinking about it, there are indeed differences between Southampton City and the small place I came from. I think that rather than letting you spend all your effort to send Paul to an elite school, if he can't keep up in the end, it's better for him to just find a good school in my hometown. It might be even better." Jennifer's words were very pleasant to hear. On one hand, she did not belittle her nephew's incompetence. On the other hand, she gave Alexander a lot of face. At least, it would not make people think that Alexander was not capable enough to send Paul to the best school. It was because Paul was not suitable for it. Jean could not help but look at Jennifer. She felt that after these years, this woman's conduct had risen to another level. Now that Jean thought about it, the reason Jennifer had chased her younger brother's family away so early was that she was afraid that Jeremy's family would cause trouble and embarrass Alexander. If Alexander was embarrassed because of Jennifer's family, she would not have a good time either. Jean pursed her lips lightly and continued to eat quietly. Alexander listened to Jennifer's words and nodded slightly. An expensive school isn't necessarily good. It has to be suitable for the child. Jennifer quickly agreed. At the dining table, everything returned to normal. Alexander suddenly thought of something and said, "Oh right. Tomorrow evening, you'll dress up and attend a business dinner with me." "What dinner?" Jennifer asked. "Do you still remember MUK? The E.Commerce company that the Locks wanted to cooperate with last time?" Jennifer asked. Alexander nodded. "The CEO of MUK has sent out an invitation to a dinner, inviting most of the upper class companies in Southampton City to attend. Inside information says that MUK may still find a local company to cooperate with, so we'll be going to pay them a visit tomorrow. There may even be a chance for us to cooperate. I'll dress well. I'll also bring Joshua with me tomorrow." Help us prepare the suits for the banquet before 5 p.m. Okay. Jennifer nodded quickly and asked again, will Eden and Jasmine go? Of course, Alexander said immediately, how could they not be included for such a gathering of the upper class? That's true. Jennifer's tone was a little smug. Speaking of Jasmine, when you see her tomorrow, tell her to have a child with Eden as soon as possible. She can only have a foothold in that big family after she has a child. Don't worry, I've told Jasmine about this. She has been smart since she was young and knows what to do. Okay, Alexander answered. He knew Jennifer would be considerate in this aspect, so there was no need to say anything more. Jean and George just quietly ate their dinner. Other than the unpleasant incident just now, this family never took the initiative to mention them anymore. Not to mention, bringing them to the high-class banquet. Alexander probably thought that only Joshua and Jasmine had the right to go socialize with him. The next day. In the afternoon, Jean slowly changed into a gown and put on makeup. While applying mascara, she asked George, are you coming with me this evening? No, are you afraid of being alone here? No, alright then. Jean put down her mascara. She had always respected her son. Previously, Jean had always brought him along because she was afraid that he would not be used to being alone. Now that they had returned for a month, he had gotten used to what he needed to get used to. If he was not used to it, he would not be able to get used to it no matter what. Jean carefully picked out a large red lipstick and applied it skillfully. Then, she put on a pair of exaggerated diamond-fringed earrings. After that, she put down her hair, and her long curly hair was casually draped over her shoulders. She was done dressing up. Jean stood up from the makeup mirror. She was wearing a black dress with a sling with little fabric, where a few straps criss-crossed on her back, revealing her perfect waistline. The skirt only reached the middle of her thighs, and if she was not careful, she would have a panty flash. The rest of her legs that were not covered were smooth and fair. She wore a pair of black sequin stilettos. Under the reflection of the light, her straight legs seemed to sparkle. Jean was the kind of woman who would seem like a kept woman even if she wore her clothes properly, not to mention a dress with little fabric. She looked so alluring that it would make people commit a crime. She walked to George's side and gently touched his head. She said, "Be good at home." George nodded. Jean casually picked up a white feather shawl that was placed at the side. The shawl could hide part of her sexiness, making her look less aggressive and more gentle and moving. She walked out of the room and went downstairs. At this moment, Alexander brought Jennifer and Joshua out of the door as well. They sat in the special car of the Lawrences and left. Jean casually went to the garage to drive her car and then slowly drove out of the Lawrence family's home. She did not lie to Monica. She really did not like driving. To her, it was meaningless to drive if she did not race. In the end, she was still patient and drove the sports car to the destination at a normal speed. Knox's reminder was right. She still had to abide by the traffic regulations. She was still worried about whether she had been punished yesterday. At this moment, in the Swan family's bamboo garden, Teddy held a traffic ticket and looked at it. His eyes almost popped out. Why did I have 12 points deducted, fined $3,000, and even had my driver's license impounded? Am I sleepwalking? Chapter 62. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Jean's identity was exposed. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. A red sports car was driving on the street. Jean glanced at her ringing cell phone and casually put on her Bluetooth earpiece. Are you going to the dinner party? The person who called asked. Yes. Alone. Or else. Wear something with more fabric, Kingsley suggested. The corners of Jean's mouth curled up slightly. Are you being hypocritical to only remind me when I'm out? I didn't ask you to seduce anyone. You're thinking too much, Jean said coldly, it's up to me how I dress. Protect yourself. Okay, Jean replied. She took off her earpiece and drove casually. To be honest, she did not want to stay in Southampton City for too long. There was nothing worth remembering here. Jean parked the car at the entrance of the banquet hall. She got out of the car. Outside the car, there were a lot of people going in and out. The scene looked very lively. MUK was a first-class foreign e-commerce enterprise, and Harkin did not have a strong e-commerce platform up until now. Once MUK brought in their professional team, they were bound to make a big difference in Harkin's market, so there were a lot of local enterprises that flocked to them. Of course, the locks were a cautionary tale. Most of the people were still in a wait-and-see state, and most of them were probably here tonight to find out the specific situation. Jean scanned the electronic invitation card and walked into the hall. Just as she walked in, a female voice suddenly sounded beside her. Jean. Jean's eyes moved slightly. She saw Jasmine wearing a light blue dress and appeared with Eden. At this moment, Jasmine was clearly surprised to see her. Why are you here? Jasmine questioned. She did not hear her mom say that Jean would come. I'm here to join in the fun. Jean smiled. What are you thinking? Jasmine's face was full of disdain. This is an official business banquet. Not everyone can come. Don't you feel shameless to come without being invited? Wouldn't Dad be mad again if he sees you? Jean, no matter what, you're still a Lawrence. Before you do anything, don't you think about the honor of our family first? Jean glanced at Jasmine, her eyes moving slightly as she looked at Eden. At that moment, Eden happened to look at Jean as well. Their eyes met. His heart palpitated. He gritted his teeth secretly and remained calm. The way Jean was dressed tonight was enough to make people fantasize. At this moment, such a gaze caused his heart to tremble. Jean did not fix her gaze on Eden, nor did she have the mood to figure out his thoughts. She said to Jasmine, "Don't be too full of yourself. You'll easily get slapped in the face." Jean. Jasmine suppressed her anger. Jean walked past her and left immediately. Jasmine was so angry that she gritted her teeth. She turned her head to look at Eden with some grievance. She seemed to see Eden's fiery gaze fixed on Jean's enchanting back. In the next second, it seemed to be an illusion. Eden looked back at Jasmine with a cold gaze and said, "Don't bother about her. If she doesn't know what's good for her, she'll seek your death sooner or later." Jasmine nodded, but she did not feel good. Did that flirtatious B*tch dress like this to seduce Eden? No. I would never let such a thing happen. Jean walked calmly in the banquet hall. Very soon, she attracted the attention of many people. Naturally, Alexander also saw her. When he saw her, his expression changed immediately. He brought Jennifer and quickly walked towards Jean. He lowered his voice and scolded her angrily, "What are you doing here? I didn't ask you to come. I came alone. Don't you have any self-awareness? How can someone like you come to a business dinner like this? This place is filled with important and influential people. This isn't a so-called entertainment banquet. Go back immediately." Jean just looked at Alexander. When George went to Angerberg for an interview, he had asked her to go home. Now, he was also asking her to go home. Jean asked, "Am I so shameful to you?" Enough. Alexander did not seem to want to waste time with Jean. "If you're capable, you should be invited to this banquet on your own. Don't leech off me." Jasmine also came with her identity as the young Madam of the Swans. Jean was speechless. Did I leech off him? What does he have for me to leech? What's there for a prestigious family that's heading towards destruction to show off about? Take advantage of the fact that the host of the banquet has yet to officially appear. Leave immediately. Otherwise, people will think that the Lawrences are unruly and will bring anyone here, Alexander ordered coldly. Just as he finished speaking, the venue suddenly fell silent. Everyone turned to look at a man who appeared on the second floor. It was West, the host of this banquet and the CEO of MUK Group. He walked down the stairs one step at a time with an imposing figure. Alexander glared at Jean. Due to West's appearance, if Jean left at this time, it would appear abrupt and rude. Hence, Alexander used his gaze to signal Jean to behave herself. Jean pretended not to see. West walked to the hall. In the hall, many people took the initiative to approach him. The workers around West blocked the others and watched him walk in one direction. Alexander looked at West walking toward him and felt a little excited. When West stopped in front of him, he quickly reached out his hand. "Mr. West. Girl, I was wondering where you could hide." West directly pulled Jean into his arms. Jean smiled. West was about 45 years old. He was very tall and burly, so Jean looked extremely petite in his arms. Everyone was shocked. "What's the situation now?" West, the legendary godfather of e-commerce, had an unspeakable relationship with Jean, the so-called eldest young lady Lawrence. This was breaking news. Everyone in the banquet hall had their eyes on them. This included the awkward Alexander, as well as Eden and Jasmine, who were not too far away. Jasmine's eyes were filled with jealousy. She clenched her fists tightly and glared fiercely at Jean, who was the center of attention. At that moment, Eden's gaze also changed slightly. What kind of shady business had Jean done all these years abroad? Seducing men everywhere. West finally let go of Jean after a long time. He completely ignored the gazes of the people around him. He deliberately said to Jean in a reproachful tone, "You're really bold to have gone missing without informing your godfather." Godfather? Everyone was shocked again. "Didn't I come to surprise you?" Jean had a fawning look on her face. "Don't give me that." West was deliberately angry. "If you want to give me a surprise, go back to work at MUK. In the future, I'll leave Harkins e-commerce market to you to handle. I can then spend more time with your godmother." What? Everyone was shocked. Harkins e-commerce market would be left to Ms. Lawrence. Godfather, don't joke. You're in the prime of your life, and yet you want to retire. Godmother won't allow it. Jean refused. She actually refused West. There were so many reputable companies in Southampton City that wanted to cooperate with MUK, and yet Ms. Lawrence said she did not want to take it over. Everyone suddenly felt that Ms. Lawrence, who had returned this time, was not simple at all. Chapter 63. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ms. Lawrence, don't play with fire. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Everyone in the banquet hall stared at the interaction between Jean and West with their mouths agape. They never thought that the eldest young lady of the Lawrences would have anything to do with the godfather of international e-commerce. In everyone's mind, Jean was still that wild girl who did not know what she was doing. She was a delinquent daughter who was chased out of the house by her biological father. No one would think about what she had done or experienced during the 7 years she was chased out. The only thing they knew was that Jean had given birth to an illegitimate child, one who was originally useless but turned out to be a genius. Jean seemed to be too different from everyone's impression at the moment. West turned his head to look at Alexander, who was standing at the side. He said, "Mr. Lawrence, you've raised a good daughter." Alexander snapped back to reality. At that moment, he seemed to have recovered from his shock. He smiled stiffly. "Mr. West, you flatter me. I've always been curious about what kind of parents could raise such an outstanding child, and I've wanted to seek advice and experience from you. My damned child is ignorant and incompetent. He's really helpless," West said sincerely. When he said that, Alexander's face became even stiffer. He forced out a few words. "Jeannie is the one who's obedient. One could see how awkward Alexander was. Did he sincerely feel that he did not have the qualifications to answer West's question? Jean smiled indifferently at the side. Let's have a good chat later. West patted Alexander's shoulder in a friendly manner and said, now, I'll borrow your daughter and let her accompany me to meet the guests. Please go ahead, Alexander said quickly. West smiled gratefully. He let Jean hold his arm and brought her to socialize with him. Jennifer watched as they walked away. The emotions on her face could not be held back any longer. She could not help but say, how did Jeannie hook up with West? Alexander responded coldly, how would I know? When he thought about how Jean had embarrassed him, he felt angry. Could it be that Jeannie and West did something shameful abroad? Jennifer said deliberately. Alexander gave her a look. Jennifer quickly said, I was just saying. She was deliberately fanning the flames. Alexander's face turned completely dark at that moment. At the banquet, West brought Jean to socialize with all the upper-class enterprises in Southampton City. West also made it very clear that MUK Group would bring their professional team to hearken into the e-commerce market in Southampton City, but because they were not familiar with the local market, they would choose to cooperate with a local enterprise. To put it bluntly, they would find a partner in Southampton City to develop the e-commerce platform together. Once the news was out, all the enterprises in the city were in an uproar. There were already some enterprises at the banquet that could not hold back and kept socializing with West, trying to deepen his impression of them. Jean accompanied West for more than half the night. She finally broke away from the crowd and took some time to go to the washroom. She had just come out of the washroom when she heard a man's voice. Are you very pleased with yourself? Jean's eyes moved slightly, and she saw Eden standing not far away. He was alone. Where did he leave Jasmine? Jean smiled faintly. Which are you referring to, young Master Swan? Eden said sarcastically, I didn't expect that the eldest young lady of the Lawrences, who once didn't even let anyone touch her hand, would accompany an old man for the sake of money and benefits. Jean's face turned slightly cold. What? Did I hit a sore spot? Eden sneered. Jean was indifferent. Young Master Swan, are you jealous? Are you kidding? Jean approached Eden and suddenly walked toward him. Eden frowned slightly and maintained his vigilance, but he could not bear to take a step back. Jean was almost stuck to his body, but she seemed to maintain a subtle distance. Her fragrance lingered in Eden's breath, making him a little confused for a moment. He heard her melodious and sweet voice as she said with a heart-stirring voice, in any case, you'll never be able to touch me in your lifetime. Eden's expression changed drastically, and he stared fiercely at Jean. At that moment, anger burned in his heart, and he grabbed Jean's arm fiercely. Jean's eyes narrowed. Just as she was about to resist. Eden. Jean and Eden turned their heads abruptly. The person who called Eden was not Jasmine, but Knox. Beside Knox was Edward. Fourth Master Swan did not come to the banquet, but why was he suddenly here? How long had he and Knox been standing there? Eden let go of Jean abruptly. Jean pursed her lips. Eden walked straight toward Edward. He showed no reluctance towards Jean. He stopped in front of Edward and said respectfully, Fourth uncle, you're here. Edward took a look at Eden and nodded slightly. I'm leaving. Jasmine is still waiting for me outside. Edward still nodded. Eden left. At the same time, Knox also left. It seemed that Jean and Fourth Master Swan were left behind on purpose. Jean was a little speechless. She rearranged her shawl. She became entangled with Eden just now, so it was a little messy. After she was done, she walked past Edward. Ms. Lawrence, Edward said, his voice was neither warm nor cold. Jean pursed her lips and stopped. Edward turned around and looked at her. Jean raised her head and looked back. She did not want to be outdone. Edward suddenly stretched out his long arms and hugged Jean in her arms. Jean was shocked and tried to push him away. At that moment, Edward's big hand was on her waist. It seemed to be exerting more force, making her unable to move. Jean frowned. She could clearly feel that Fourth Master Swan's hand was on her exposed waist and not on her shawl. Jean gritted her teeth and was about to speak. Fourth Master Swan suddenly bent down and lowered his head. Jean's heart moved. His lips brushed past her lips as if it was an illusion. He then moved toward her ear. At this moment, Jean even thought that if Fourth Master Swan dared to kiss her, she would throw him over her shoulder. However, she maintained her calm. She only felt a wave of heat lingering around her ears. "Ms. Lawrence, it's best that you don't play with fire," Edward uttered with a threat and a hint of ambiguity. "I don't have enough willpower." As he finished, he kissed Jean's earlobe with his slightly cold lips. It was only for a second. Edward then let go of Jean and turned around to leave. "Fourth Master Swan," Jean called out to him. Edward stopped in his tracks. "Don't forget that this is just a deal," Jean reminded. Edward did not give any reply and left. "Damn it. B*****. Jean took a deep breath. She forced herself to calm down and walked toward the banquet hall. West was still in the crowd. When he saw Jean come out, he waved for her to go over. Jean walked over. West looked at Jean and suddenly smiled. "Why is your right ear so red?" Jean was stunned. West seemed to find it very interesting. He looked left and right. "Your left ear is fine, but your right ear is completely red. Is your right ear shy?" It was clearly a joke, but Jean was speechless. She smiled and said, "I'm allergic to this earring." No. She was just allergic to someone. Chapter 64. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Move Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. In the banquet hall, Jean subtly changed the topic. West looked around and said, "I just heard that the Fourth Master Swan from Southampton City is here." Jean kept her smile and did not reply. "I've been looking forward to meeting him for a long time," West muttered. At that moment, he turned around and looked at Jean. "Did you see him?" "No," Jean smiled very naturally. West was a little frustrated. Jean said, "Godfather, it's getting late. You also saw that I'm feeling a little uncomfortable due to my ear allergy, so I'll go back first. I'll see you tomorrow." "Okay." West nodded. "Don't go missing again." "Don't worry." Jean said a few words to West and left the banquet hall. Since she had achieved her goal for the night, there was no need to waste any more time socializing. She walked out of the hall's entrance. A worker walked over in a hurry. Jean avoided the person, but at that moment, her shawl fell off accidentally. At this moment, a few flashes of light appeared behind her, accompanied by clicking sounds. Jean turned her head. The paparazzi had run away with the SLR camera. Jean pursed her lips. The staff member hurriedly picked up the shawl on the ground for Jean with an apologetic look on his face. "I'm sorry, miss, I'm really sorry." Jean took the shawl, nodded slightly and left. She drove back to the Lawrence family's courtyard. In the hall, Alexander and Jennifer had left without anyone knowing. In any case, they had returned. At this moment, they were clearly waiting for Jean in the hall. "What's your relationship with West?" Alexander shouted at her. Jean was calm. "Didn't you see? He's my godfather." "Godfather?" Alexander stood up from the sofa and walked toward Jean. "Godfather? What godfather? Why didn't I know that you have a godfather? What do you know about me?" Jean asked. "After you chased me out of the Lawrences, did you ask about me? Did you care about me?" You wouldn't have known even if I died overseas years ago. Jean. I'm telling the truth. Jean's voice was also very loud, so at this time, you don't have the right to question me. I only need to take responsibility for the life I want to live. It has nothing to do with you. Do you want me to chase you out of this family again? Alexander roared angrily. He was really infuriated by Jean's words. Do you think I care? Jean looked at Alexander. The smile on her lips was filled with contempt. With my current conditions, what do you think the Lawrences have that are worthy for me to stay? You. Alexander was really furious. Jean turned around and left. As she walked, she said, to be honest, I'm curious. Why do I still have to return to the Lawrences? After thinking about it, it's probably. Is George your illegitimate child with West? Behind her, Alexander's furious voice was suddenly heard. Jean stopped in her tracks. She smiled. It was just a very natural smile. There was no emotion to be seen. Fortunately, she really did not have any feelings for her so-called father. The reason she still stayed in the Lawrences was probably to seek justice for her mother and take back everything that belonged to her mother. She did not say anything and went upstairs. It was a waste to talk to the Lawrences. Alexander saw how Jean ignored him. He was going crazy with anger. At this moment, Jennifer was fanning the flames by the side. Since she didn't deny it, doesn't that mean that she has admitted it? Alexander's face turned completely dark. Jennifer said, I heard that West has a family and that his child is already very old. Is Jean interfering in someone else's family? That's too immoral. Today, she appeared in such a high-profile manner at the banquet and was even affectionate with West. She even called him her godfather. If this were to spread in the future, our family's reputation. Enough. Alexander was furious. You better discipline Jasmine and Joshua well. I know how to deal with Jean's matter. Yes, yes, yes. I won't say any more. You should also calm down. Jennifer quickly tried to fawn over him. At that moment, Alexander wanted to beat Jean to death. This time, she had returned to go against him. Jean returned to her room. George was sitting in front of the computer typing code. Jean took a deep breath and walked toward her son with a smile on her face. There was no need to affect her mood because of some unimportant people, much less George's mood. What are you doing? George directly closed the computer as soon as Jean asked. Jean frowned. I can't look. No, George was very determined. What did Kingsley ask you to do again? Jean asked. George did not answer. Jean patted George's little head and scolded fiercely, Kingsley, that exploiter. Stop working. Take a bath and sleep, be Noel dem, okay? George nodded obediently. At that moment it was obvious that his eyes were flickering. George went to the bathroom to take a bath first. Jean was a little tired and lay on the chaise longue in the room to wait. She opened the French window and allowed the hot summer breeze to blow in. She then lit up a cigarette. Actually, she rarely smoked, especially in front of George. Occasionally, there were exceptions. There was no reason. She took a deep breath. In her mind, a voice echoed. Is George the illegitimate child between you and West? Jean's eyes moved slightly. This was what her father was like. He would only think of her in the most despicable way. At this moment, Jean's phone suddenly rang. Jean came back to her senses and picked it up. Monica. D***mn. I've only been away for a week, and so many things have happened to you. Monica was rather excited. What happened to me? Why didn't you tell me that George is a genius? Monica questioned, do you still treat me as your sister? Am I still George's godmother? I wanted to surprise you. F***ck. Monica cursed, Then why didn't you tell me that you have a relationship with West, the CEO of MUK Group? Do you also think that we have a relationship? Jean was very calm. Aren't you his goddaughter? Monica was straightforward. Do you really think I'm his goddaughter? Jean smoked a cigarette and asked nonchalantly. Or what? Monica was a little confused. Could there be some kind of illicit relationship between you? Stop joking. How's that possible? Do you trust me that much? I'm not the same as before, and we've been separated for 7 years. It won't matter even if we've been separated for 70 years. Monica was resolute. How can I not know what kind of person you are? Don't interrupt me on purpose. Quickly tell me your true identity now. Are you a super big shot? Are you like the main character of the TV series I've been watching? Once your mask falls off, will Southampton City tremble? Jean could not help but laugh. She was amused by Monica. In fact, she was really moved by her trust. Jean put out the cigarette butt. She said, No, I only worked hard to live. Don't make it sound so deep. You know I don't understand you since my grades are bad. Monica was a little unhappy. I'll tell you in the future when the time is right, but I can't tell you now. Why? I can't tell you either. Jean. Monica was going crazy. Monica. Compared to Monica's excitement, Jean's voice was much gentler. Thank you. Monica was moved. Jean was suddenly so emotional, she was somewhat taken aback. Chapter 65. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Don't worry, you weren't cuckolded. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. On the phone, Jean's gentle voice was heard. Didn't you just come back from a business trip? Why aren't you resting earlier? I just got off the plane and am on my way home. Monica was easily led astray. You came back so late. It's all because my dad isn't in good health. If there's a business trip, I have to go. A flower like me will be crippled by my father sooner or later, Monica complained. Jean could not help but laugh. She felt that it was a happy thing to have Monica by her side. The two of them chatted for a long time. Monica said, I'm at the garage. Let's talk tomorrow. Rest early. Okay. Monica hung up the phone. The car was parked properly. After the driver opened the car door for Monica, he took out her luggage and sent it into the elevator. Thank you for your hard work, Monica said gently to the chauffeur. The chauffeur said respectfully, Take care, Miss Cardellini. Monica nodded. When the elevator closed, Monica looked at the number on the elevator. It's midnight. Finn, that B****, should be asleep by now. The elevator arrived at her floor. Monica pushed the huge suitcase out. After pressing on the fingerprint lock, she found that the house was indeed quiet. She knew that Finn must be asleep. Well, Finn had always been a disciplined person. He would go to bed before 11 o'clock p.m., and there was no reason for him not to sleep. Moreover, he did not know that Monica would be back today. Every time Monica went on a business trip, whether it was before she left, returned, or the few days she was gone, the two of them would never have any contact. How could such a marriage be considered a marriage? We should just end it as soon as possible. Monica thought fiercely while she pushed her luggage back to her room quietly, trying her best not to disturb anyone. She went back to her bedroom and opened her luggage to take out some necessities. The moment she opened her luggage, her eyes paused. When Monica saw a leather belt overseas, she felt that it was very suitable for Finn. It was simple and low-key. In short, at first glance, she felt that it was very compatible with that B****. Monica guessed that Finn's birthday would be in a few days, so she bought it as a birthday present. It was not very expensive anyway. Monica hesitated for a moment before picking it up and walking out of the room. Then, she walked to Finn's bedroom and knocked on the door. For some reason, she felt a little excited. Monica took a deep breath to make herself look normal. She had even thought of how to give it to Finn so that they would not be embarrassed. The door suddenly opened. Monica was about to hand over the gift box when her hand stiffened, and her eyes froze. It was not Finn who opened the door, but Finn's old lover. Patsy Larson. Patsy looked at Monica in her pajamas and asked, looking for Finn. Monica came back to her senses. Then, she smiled naturally. "It's nothing much." Patsy looked straight at her. Monica said, "I just wanted to let him know that I'm back. Of course, you can pretend that I don't exist." Then, Monica turned around and left. BDNV at that moment, Finn walked out of the room and looked at Monica, who had left. Patsy said, "She just wanted to let you know that she's back." Finn nodded slightly. "Finn," Patsy called out to him, "I'm sleepy. Can I sleep now? The bed is made. Go to sleep." "Okay." Patsy turned around and went to sleep on the big bed. Finn looked in the direction of the door and slowly walked out. Monica had returned to her room. The next second, she heard a knock on the door. She opened the door and saw Finn standing at the door. Monica's lips curled up. "Did I disturb you?" Finn frowned. "If you knew your old lover was coming, you should have told me beforehand. I would have come back a few days later or stayed in a hotel. It would have been awkward for me to disturb you like this," Monica said calmly. "Why were you looking for me?" Finn did not seem to hear what she said and cut to the chase. "Didn't I tell your old lover? I just wanted to tell you that I'm back." Finn looked at the gift box on Monica's bed. Monica was holding the box when she left. She followed Finn's line of sight. Finn opened his mouth, but he did not say anything. Monica's phone rang. She picked up the phone, and the name Michael flashed on the screen. It was obvious, so Finn saw it too. Monica picked up the call. "Michael. Are you home?" Michael's gentle voice was heard coming from the other end. As it was a quiet night, Finn heard it even though the speaker was not on. "I just got home. It's good that you're home safely. Rest early." "Okay," Monica replied and asked, "By the way, are you free tomorrow?" "Yes," Michael responded without asking anything. Monica chuckled. That sincere smile came from the depths of her heart. "When I was on a business trip, I saw a gift that suited you. I'll bring it to you tomorrow." Bam! The door was slammed. Monica was shocked. "Finn, are you F***king crazy? What was that sound?" Michael asked from the other side. It's nothing. I closed the door too hard just now," Monica said quickly. "As long as you're fine. I've been on the plane for more than 10 hours. I'm a little sleepy." "Then sleep early. See you tomorrow." "See you tomorrow." Monica hung up the phone. She put down the phone and felt a strange feeling in her heart. She took a deep breath. She was big-hearted anyway. Otherwise, she would not have gotten into a marriage of convenience with her ex-boyfriend and become friends with him again. She always felt that she would never be able to find a good man in this life. If that was the case, so be it. In the Swan family's manor, in Bamboo Garden. At 2:00 a.m., Knox was summoned over. Knox broke down and looked at the culprit leaning against his bed, leisurely looking at his phone. He asked, "Edward, can you not be crazy all the time? You don't have a woman to spend the night with, but I do. Do you know how terrible it is to leave right after doing the deed with someone? Are you not terrible to sleep with a different woman every day then?" Edward raised his eyebrow. Knox had no strength to retort. He said in a flustered and exasperated manner, "I know what you want. Luckily, I made preparations before I went to bed." Edward glanced at Knox expressionlessly. Knox took out his phone and looked at the information that was sent over. West is the CEO and the largest shareholder of MUK. He's responsible for the operation of the entire MUK market. West is a very talented person. He started from scratch and has made it to where he is now. He has a great influence in the international e-commerce industry and is now known as the godfather of e-commerce. Edward glanced at Knox again. Knox pursed his lips. All right, I'll pick the key points. Ms. Lawrence worked at MUK 2 years ago. From being an ordinary employee, she climbed to the position of marketing director. West was very appreciative of her, so he took her as his goddaughter. Not long ago, a week before her return, which was also when the Lawrences asked her to come back, she suddenly and unilaterally quit her job at MUK and returned to Southampton City without West's consent. According to the investigation, Ms. Lawrence and West were just subordinates who admired each other. Don't worry, you weren't cuckolded. Chapter 66. You are listening at novelfull.audio. My master told you to keep warm. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. In the huge room, Knox said word by word, don't worry, you weren't cuckolded. Edward gave him a look. Knox calmed down and said, but it is said that West's mixed-blood son has been pursuing Ms. Lawrence. Don't worry, Ms. Lawrence refused. That said, for your happiness, I've specially investigated West's mixed-blood son, Mubier. He's 22 years old and young. Other than being young and knowing how to flirt with girls, he can't be compared to you. Edward did not have any expression. Knox smiled smugly. Don't you think that I'm great and looked into everything for you? Are you sure that's what I wanted to know? Edward raised his eyebrows slightly. Or else? Knox was a little confused. He had followed Fourth Master Swan for 25 years. Yes, from the moment he was born. So, how could he not know what Fourth Master Swan was thinking? Take down the news, Edward said bluntly. Knox was stunned. What news? As he said that, he went over to look at Edward's phone very naturally. Edward turned his phone off. Knox frowned. What is it? Just do as I say, Edward said coldly. Knox was speechless, but he still nodded. Okay. You can leave now. I still have something to say. Knox was a little excited, but his expression was still very serious. Edward looked at Knox. Knox said, I just received news from the technology department that the Swan's real estate industry's internal firewall has been tampered with. Edward frowned slightly. Weren't you the one who supervised the firewall? You said that it's indestructible. I went all over the world to look for the world's top software experts, and they upgraded and maintained it from time to time. I even specially looked for master hackers to crack it. No one has cracked it. Well, the truth is that a flaw has appeared now. Be calm, it's not really cracked yet. The technology department is urgently repairing it now. Don't do anything first. Ha! Aren't you afraid that the company's information will be leaked? Knox was puzzled. Let's see how capable this person is and how far he can crack it. Is there an invisible figure we overlooked and don't know about? If so, we have to figure out who this person is, and whether he's an enemy or a friend. So, don't alert the person and follow the clues, Edward instructed. Knox smacked his forehead. Why didn't I think of such a thorough plan? Fourth Master Swan, how does your brain work? Edward ignored Knox and said indifferently, go back. I'm sleepy. You summon me when you need me, but you chase me away right after you're done using me, Knox muttered, how heartless. In the end, he turned around and left. After he left, Fourth Master Swan looked at his phone again. On the screen, there was a photo of Jean being secretly taken by someone. In the photo, Jean's back was completely bare. Her perfect back curve was not hidden at all. Her long and slender legs were straight and smooth. The moment she looked back with surprise, she was so beautiful. It was originally a financial news article. The news exposed the relationship between Jean and MUK. However, there were many misleading words such as "godfather." This was not a simple word in many cases. Naturally, it was published as an article by the media. Nevertheless, most of the comments were not about the bad relationship between Jean and West. "This woman is too beautiful. My nose is bleeding. As a woman, I can only say that my heart is moved. Does eldest young Lady Lawrence still need a godfather? At this moment, I suddenly want to crazily at Yen Xian. Were you blind 7 years ago? No, you shouldn't have eyes. In fact." Topics such as hashtag MS Lawrence's back, hashtag MS Lawrence waist, and hashtag MS Lawrence long legs were trending. They were ranked 1, 2, and 3 respectively. Even hashtag Eden was blind was the 12th trending topic. The next day, Jean was woken up by the ringtone of her phone. She glanced at the incoming call. Monica. Monica was so energetic that it was scary. Isn't she tired after a whole day? Where's your news? Monica had always been very agitated. News? What news? Jean sat up from the bed. What's wrong? Last night, before I went to bed, I saw that you were on trending topics due to a piece of news. There were quite a few trends, but I saw that other than making you more popular, they didn't have any negative effect on you, so I didn't pay too much attention to them. When I woke up this morning, it seemed like I had a dream last night. Your news was handled so cleanly that I couldn't find it even after searching. Jean did not seem to mind. If it's gone, so be it. How can this be? Monica was indignant. That photo of you yesterday was so beautiful. How can it be gone just like that? Eden would definitely regret it if he saw it. More importantly, the topic of hashtag Eden was blind was even trending. There were countless people who tagged him on Twitter, but they're all gone now. Damn it. Jean smiled. Do you really care so much about making Eden regret? Who asked him to cheat on you? He even did it so matter-of-factly without any remorse. Thinking about how he treated you so well but secretly slept with Jasmine and even shamelessly said bad things about you in front of the media makes me so angry that I'm going to die. Monica was easily controlled by her emotions. There's nothing to be angry about. A cheating couple won't end well. Jean's eyes turned cold. Besides, you said that there were many people who tagged him last night. How could he not see the news? Monica was stunned. That's true. On the contrary, I have to thank the person who removed my news. Otherwise, once the Swans public relations team makes a move today, do you think that my news will continue to develop in a good direction? Jean could completely imagine how things would turn out. In the end, it would be like 7 years ago, where her reputation would be in tatters. Her dark and cold gaze carried a hint of cruelty. You seem to make sense. Monica was once again convinced by Jean. So don't be conflicted. You slept so late last night and woke up so early this morning. Aren't you tired? Monica suddenly fell silent for a few seconds. What's wrong? Nothing, I'm just planning to go back to sleep. Monica's tone was light. Jean kept feeling that Monica was hiding something. Monica directly hung up the phone. She lay on her bed. Could she tell Jean that she, who was tired after coming back in the middle of the night last night, did not sleep at all for the whole night? Damn. This is frustrating. Jean put down her phone and planned to sleep for a while. It was only 6:00 a.m., and she had slept late last night. She had just laid down when someone knocked on the door. Jean got up and opened the door. A servant stood at the door. Miss, a gentleman called Teddy is looking for you. Teddy again. Jean went back to her room and changed into a set of clothes. She washed up briefly before going downstairs. Downstairs, Teddy stood there respectfully and waited for her. At this moment, other than the servants, no one else in the house had woken up so early. "Has your master fallen sick again?" Jean asked straightforwardly. "Who knows?" Anyway, Edward had woken Teddy up before dawn. Teddy said, "Fourth master asked me to bring you some clothes." As he spoke, many people walked in from outside the hall. All of them were carrying bags of clothes in their hands. They stood in rows behind Teddy with an imposing manner. Jean frowned slightly. "My master said that the weather in Southampton City is rather cold. He also told you to keep warm, Ms. Lawrence." "Cold? It's the middle of F***king summer now. The weather is 37 to 38 degrees. How is it cold?" Chapter 67. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Embarrass Alexander and Jennifer Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Jean looked at the pile of clothes in her room and felt like breaking down. Isn't Fourth Master Swan very busy? Isn't he very mysterious? Didn't they say that he's cold and abstinent, and that strangers aren't allowed to get close to him? Their F***king lies. Fourth Master Swan is a lunatic. Jean took a deep breath to calm herself down. After all, it was not a bad thing for someone to give her clothes. She did not need to panic. Just as she was adjusting her emotions, there was a knock on the door. Jean frowned. It was early in the morning. Could she take a break? The servant at the door said, "Eldest young lady, old master wants you to go to his room." Jean's eyes narrowed, and the corner of her mouth curled into a cold smile. She said, "Help me tidy up the clothes in my room." The servant was a little unwilling. Moreover, she heard that the eldest young lady was going to be kicked out again. Since Jean was going to get out of this house, why did she still have to help her tidy up her room? Jean ignored the servant's thoughts and walked straight to Jonathan's room. The door opened. Just as she had expected, Alexander, Jennifer, and Joshua were all in Jonathan's study. Everyone watched as she walked in calmly and smiled. "Grandpa, you called for me." Jonathan glanced at Jean and said bluntly, "You are a sensible person. We don't need to beat around the bush. Please speak, Grandpa." Jean did not change her expression. "What's the relationship between West and you? Would you believe me if I said it?" Jean chuckled. "Tell me." Jonathan said coldly. Jean replied, "A normal relationship. 2 years ago, I applied for a job at MUK. Due to George's superb mastery of software since young, he helped me develop very quickly in MUK and rose all the way to the position of marketing director. West appreciated me quite a bit. Seeing that I was alone overseas and had no one to rely on, he accepted me as his goddaughter. That's all." Jonathan was extremely serious. "That's all?" Jean was certain. "Do you think we'll believe it?" Alexander suddenly interrupted. "How can a person like you without a diploma or a degree apply for a position at MUK? You became MUK's marketing director. Don't you even know how to lie?" Alexander was sarcastic. "Since you've decided, then it's useless for me to say anything more." Jean was very calm. She had calmly accepted her biological father's belittlement of her. "Don't act like I've wronged you. Facts speak louder than words." Alexander was certain. "So, how do you plan to deal with me? The reason I let you come back this time was to let you marry Thetis Locke. I hope you can behave yourself and learn to be grateful. Now that the marriage with the Lockes is gone, you're still acting on your own. You even did some shady things that hurt the Lawrences' reputation. While the situation hasn't reached the worst stage yet, take your son, George, and leave the Lawrences. You want to kick me out again, right?" Jean's eyes turned cold. "It's not that I'm cruel, it's that you did something immoral and insulted the Lawrences' reputation." Jean looked at Alexander. Jennifer said on purpose at this moment as if she was speaking with sincerity, "It's not that it's not good for Jeannie to find her own love. If it was an ordinary boy, it wouldn't be a big deal even if his conditions are slightly worse. However, West is not only old, but he also has a family. His child is almost the same age as Jeannie. If this were to spread out, I don't know how ugly things would be. Actually, we're doing this for Jeannie's good. Harkin is a place with many people. If she leaves earlier, she won't have to suffer verbal violence." It was meant for Jonathan to hear. Jonathan was the head of the family. Everything required his permission. Nevertheless, at this moment, Jonathan did not say a word. Jennifer said again, "Jasmine also called me last night. He said that the Swans still have some opinions about Jeannie. If anything happens to Jeannie, it'll implicate Eden. Although Eden and Jean are no longer related, it'll still affect the Swans. If this continues, it'll also affect Jasmine's marriage." Jonathan glanced at Jennifer and turned to Jean. "What do you say?" Jean said coldly, "Do I still have the right to choose? Back then, when I was chased away by you, it was only a matter of one flight ticket. Now, it's only going to be 2 tickets. Jonathan frowned. "Well." Jean turned to Alexander, "Dad, you don't need to make so many excuses if you want me to leave. Just say it, and I'll turn around and leave. Why do you have to say that I'm immoral? If you want to say that I'm immoral, I guess it runs in the family." "Jean, what do you mean?" Alexander was furious. "Isn't the meaning obvious?" Jean mocked coldly, "When little mom seduced you, my mom was pregnant. Why didn't you think it was immoral?" Alexander was exposed, and he was furious. "Also, little mom, how could you say those words so righteously? When you seduced my dad, did he not have a family? When Jasmine seduced Eden, did Eden not have a girlfriend?" Jean laughed as she spoke, as she really thought it was funny. "Now, what right do you have to act like great people and educate me?" At this moment, Jennifer's face was also red from Jean's words. All these years, she had been playing the role of the Lawrence's madam and had always been respected by people. No one had ever mentioned anything about her past. Now that Jean had suddenly said it so bluntly, she was embarrassed. After Jean finished, she did not care about anyone's emotions. She smiled and said, "Dad, little mom, people aren't stupid. The reason others didn't mention your past is that they didn't want to embarrass you. It doesn't mean that they didn't exist. Let me give you a piece of advice. One should know shame." Jean. Alexander was furious. At that moment, he was flushed red from Jean's words. Jean was fearless. She appeared extremely calm. "I'll buy the plane tickets myself. I won't waste the Lawrence's money." After saying that, she turned around and was about to leave. "Jean." Jonathan suddenly called out to her. The corners of Jean's mouth curled up. She turned around and asked, "Is there anything else, Grandpa? Did I ask you to leave?" Jonathan said coldly. Jean raised her eyebrows slightly. Alexander, Jennifer, and Joshua were all surprised. This morning, Alexander went to look for Jonathan to discuss the matter of making Jean leave. Jonathan did not refute him, so he thought that he had agreed. "Dad." Alexander could not hold it in any longer. "Let's not talk about the relationship between Jean and West for now. As an elder, once something happens, you want to chase away your daughter. Alexander, I thought that the matter from 7 years ago made you repent." Jonathan criticized righteously. Jean sneered. "So, has Jonathan started playing the emotional card?" "Dad, I'm doing this from the Lawrence's standpoint, don't talk so righteously. When you were with Jennifer, why didn't you say that you were doing it from the Lawrence's standpoint?" Jonathan retorted. Alexander's face turned red. He was embarrassed. "That said, Jean is at fault too. As a junior, no matter what your elders are like, you can't be so disrespectful. Grandpa, you're right. Jean pretended to be obedient. In any case, as a junior, what if she was told off by her elders? Alexander was the old and shameless one. There's no need to say anything else. Jean doesn't have to leave. In fact, I want her to get involved in the Lawrence's business and take on a part of our responsibility. Jonathan enunciated each word clearly. Chapter 68. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The Lawrence's Scheme Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Jonathan's words echoed in the room. For a moment, Alexander thought he had heard wrong. He looked at Jonathan, unable to react in time. At this moment, Joshua was even more agitated. He shouted at Jonathan, why should she be allowed to work in the company? What qualifications does she have? To Joshua, the only person who was qualified to work at the Lawrence enterprise was him. What qualifications do you have? Jonathan's face darkened. I'm the first grandchild of the first child, and only a man is qualified. Joshua said matter-of-factly. Jean suddenly smiled. The Lawrence's preference for sons over daughters was deeply rooted in their hearts from generation to generation. I'm afraid you have some misunderstanding about being the first grandchild of the first child, Jean said with some sarcasm. Women belong to other families. As a woman, you don't have the right to work at the company. Joshua said righteously. He was especially proud of being the only son of this family. Jonathan was furious. Joshua, have your parents raised you this way all these years? Joshua was stunned. He looked at Jonathan. Jonathan's expression was extremely ugly. So you think that just because you're the only son in the family, you can do whatever you want without striving for advancement? You think that the Lawrences will belong to you sooner or later, right? Grandpa. At this moment, Joshua seemed to have realized something was wrong. Ever since he was young, he had always been pampered the most. That's why you don't strive for advancement. You just muddle along and wait for death. Jonathan was merciless. At this moment, Joshua was being scolded in a very embarrassing manner. He had never been scolded like this before. Jonathan did not care about Joshua's emotions at all. There are no rules in this family where only men can enter the company to work. Also, there's no such thing as only a son can inherit the traditions of our family's enterprise. To me, I'll hand over the enterprise to whoever is more capable. Grandpa. Joshua was a little flustered. Enough. Jonathan did not seem to want to waste any more time with Joshua. He turned his head toward Jean and said, since you said that you relied on your capability to enter MUK and rose all the way to the position of marketing director, then go to the company to work and prove yourself with facts. Sure. Jean agreed immediately. This was the purpose of her return, to begin with. She wanted to come back and reclaim the Lawrence enterprise. Of course, she was not grateful to Jonathan. She knew he had supported her today just to squeeze her beneficial value from her. Once she was useless, she would end up the same as her mother. Jean could see it, but Joshua could not understand it. He was still agitated. Jennifer pulled him back. At this moment, it was obvious that the old man was biased toward Jean. No matter how much they said, they would only be scolded more. Jennifer had always been good at reading people's expressions. Jonathan saw that Jean agreed immediately and instructed, everyone else can leave now. Alex, stay to discuss the specific matters regarding Jean going to work tomorrow. Jean smiled slightly. Okay. Jennifer also agreed. Joshua's face was filled with anger as he was forcefully dragged away by Jennifer. In the room, Alexander's expression was not too good either. Jonathan could tell, so his tone was a little gentler. Are you not satisfied with my arrangement? Dad, you know very well that I don't like Jean, Alexander said very unhappily, not to mention I didn't have any feelings for her in the past because of her mother, she has been treating me lightly ever since she returned. Now, you're still letting her strut around in this house. I have my considerations too, Jonathan said bluntly, think about it carefully. Back then, we let Jean return to form a marriage agreement with the Locks, but in the end, the Locks were forced to go bankrupt. Don't you think that it has something to do with her? Alexander was shocked. He did not think so much. The Locks went bankrupt because of MUK, and Jean has a close relationship with MUK. Jonathan added. So we're being played by Jean. Alexander gritted his teeth. That's not important. What's important is that we know what we want, Jonathan said to his son. The marriage with the Locks was just a deal with them. Now that there's a better opportunity, why don't we use it? You mean, let Jean help us cooperate with MUK? Alexander immediately understood. Jonathan nodded. Alexander still had some misgivings, but I'm afraid that Jean will be like her mother one day, and we won't be able to control her at all. If you can't control her, can't you just do what you did to her mom to her? Jonathan smiled coldly. Alexander was stunned, then he slowly said, after all, she's my biological daughter. Don't worry, I won't let you kill her unless it's absolutely necessary. You don't have to think too much about the rest of the matter. What you need to do now is to make use of Jean to discuss the collaboration with MUK. By the way, let me remind you that Joshua definitely won't be able to continue developing like this. Jonathan's expression was serious. You have to put pressure on him. Alexander nodded. All right, I know what to do. A loving mother is a waste of a child. Don't tell Jennifer about the matter of pressuring Joshua. She has little tricks, but she can't think of the big picture. Okay. Think about how to use Jean. I'm already old. One day, you'll have to make your own decisions, Alexander said earnestly. Okay, I won't let you down. Jonathan nodded and beckoned for him to leave. Alexander walked out of the room. Jennifer was waiting for him at the door. The thing that Alexander liked the most about Jennifer was that she was gentle and considerate. She always put him first. Unlike a certain woman, who never regarded him as anything. In fact, in front of that woman, she always made him feel that he was worthless. Dear, how are you? Did Dad scold you? Jennifer was very concerned. Alexander shook his head. As he walked, he said, Dad has got the intention to let Jean develop in the company. What? Tell Joshua to not spend all his time thinking about having fun. If he really wants to have fun, he can't blame anyone for not getting anything in the end. Alexander strode away after that. Jennifer did not believe this at all. Didn't the Lawrences always value sons over daughters? If I hadn't given birth to Joshua back then, how could I have become a Lawrence? Jennifer's expression turned vicious. I won't let it slip through my fingers just like that. Jean returned to her room. George woke up in a daze. We'll go out and have dinner with your grandfather later, Jean said. Did he come here? George asked. Jean nodded as she went to the cloakroom to look for clothes. She saw a dazzling array of clothes. Jean had to admit that the fourth Master Swan had a good eye. She chose a traditional dark green dress. The slit was very low, and it looked very conservative. Despite that, due to her good figure, her curves were clear, and she was still enchanting. After George washed up and changed his clothes, Jean brought him out of the door and went straight to the hotel where West stayed. Jean knocked on the door, and the door opened. She was suddenly hugged tightly from the front. Jean was speechless. The man who was hugging her was very excited. Surprise. Damn. Why is Mubier here too? Chapter 69. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Who's cheating on who? Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. At the door, Mubier was hugging Jean. George was unhappy. Jean was also unhappy. She twisted her body. Let go. Mubier did not let go. He hugged her even tighter. It's been so long. Don't you miss me? I don't. But I miss you to death. Mubier seemed to have long gotten used to Jean's indifference and did not care at all. Jean pursed her lips tightly. George also took 2 steps back with great tacit understanding. The next second, Jean did a clean shoulder throw, and Mubier suddenly fell to the ground. A violent sound filled the entire corridor. Ah! Mubier shouted, "Are you murdering your husband?" Jean was unmoved. She tidied her clothes slightly and completely ignored Mubier, who was on the ground, preparing to lead George in. "Ms. Lawrence, you're so strong." A familiar male voice came from not far away. Jean suddenly turned her head. She did not know when Fourth Master Swan had appeared at the end of the corridor. Knox followed beside him. At this moment, Fourth Master Swan brought Knox and walked toward her step by step. Edward stopped at a very close distance. Then, he looked down at Jean from above. "Fourth Master, why are you here?" Jean forced herself to smile. "I'm just passing by," Fourth Master Swan said. After saying that, he walked past her with Knox. Jean frowned slightly. Mubier got up from the ground with difficulty and looked at the 2 figures who had left. "Who's that person? He's so arrogant." "Fourth Master Swan of Southampton City." F***ck. Mubier swore. "The wretched man who harassed you." Jean turned to look at Mubier. "Don't worry, I'll protect you." Mubier was serious. Jean smiled. She beckoned for George to enter the hotel suite. At this moment, Knox followed beside Edward and could not help but say, "I'm afraid that Ms. Lawrence is really not simple." Edward was expressionless. "Do you want me to investigate her thoroughly?" Knox asked. "No need. Fourth Master Swan. Jean is Jean. She has nothing to look into," Edward said straightforwardly. Knox pursed his lips. He turned his head to look at Edward. In the past, he was worried that this man would not fall in love. Now, he was worried that this man had fallen too deeply in love. In the hotel, in the presidential suite, Jean was chatting with West and Mubier. She said, "I'm going to work at the Lawrence Enterprise tomorrow." "What do you need me to do?" West asked. "Alexander asked me to work at the company. His motive is very simple. He wants the Lawrence Enterprise and MUK to work together. Before I came here, I also investigated the Lawrence Enterprise. It's not an excellent company," West said bluntly. Jean nodded. She also knew the current situation of the Lawrence Enterprise. Even if Alexander died, the Lawrence Enterprise would most likely face bankruptcy. However, the Lawrence Enterprise will be different with you around. West smiled. Jean also smiled. West said, "My trip to Southampton City was arranged by you and Kingsley. I'll do whatever you want me to do." "Thank you," Jean said sincerely. "You're welcome." West smiled. "If it weren't for Kingsley, I wouldn't be where I am today." Jean still admired Kingsley sometimes. After all, a person with a strong sense of purpose might not be very smart, but he could make many people feel that he was a good person. Sometimes, Jean even felt that he was a good person. Jean and West had been discussing the specific cooperation between MUK and the Lawrence Enterprise in the hotel. It was not until a little late in the afternoon that Jean left with George. When they left, Mubier insisted on seeing them off, but Jean refused. Mubier looked at them with a face full of reluctance. Jean was unmoved. She held George's hand and walked into the elevator. When she walked in, she halted again. She really felt that Fourth Master Swan was haunting her. Fourth Master Swan looked at her very coldly. On the contrary, Knox, who was beside him, smiled meaningfully. What a coincidence, Knox took the initiative to speak. Jean smiled. Ms. Lawrence, have you eaten dinner? Knox asked. Tomorrow, George will go to school. I need to go back early to help him prepare. What Jean meant was that they would not have dinner together. Oh. Knox nodded and did not say anything else. The elevator arrived. Jean held George's hand and prepared to leave. When will you be free, Ms. Lawrence? Behind her, Fourth Master Swan suddenly asked. Jean turned around. I've been very busy. Is that so? Yes. Jean smiled slightly and left with George. Edward watched her leave. Knox also looked at her. Her figure in that dress was really moving. No wonder Fourth Master Swan can't forget her even after such a long time. Jean brought George back to the Lawrence family's home. Just as they reached the door, Jean received a call from Monica. Jeannie, what are you doing? Monica's deliberately fawning voice came from the other side. What's the matter? Jean was alert. Are you free for dinner tonight? George is going to school tomorrow, and I'm going to work at the Lawrence Enterprise tomorrow too. I have a lot of things to prepare. You're going to work at the Lawrence Enterprise? Your dad will let you. Monica was excited. Yes. Really? Has your dad changed? It was not that he changed his personality, it was that he was forced to do so. Alexander wanted Jean to win the collaboration with MUK, so he had no choice but to entrust her with a heavy responsibility. Once she let the Lawrences regain their glory, she would immediately lose everything. Then let's have a meal together to help you celebrate. There's no need to celebrate. There was nothing to celebrate. Jeannie, can't you come out and accompany me? I'm in a bad mood. Monica played the bitter card. What's the matter? Finn's old lover came. I'm feeling suffocated. Monica gritted her teeth. Jean frowned slightly. I don't want to go back and look at those two, so come out and accompany me. Send me the location. I'll go there in a while. I know you're the best. Monica hung up the phone excitedly. The moment she hung up the phone, she still felt a little guilty. After all. She picked up the phone and made another call. The person who answered the call was Knox. Done. Send me the address, Monica said. Not bad, Knox praised. Of course, it's me. Monica was proud. Should I call Finn? Knox asked. You're not allowed to call him. Monica was agitated. If you dare to call him, I won't let Jeannie come. Did the two of you quarrel again? What quarrel? How can I quarrel with him? Monica scoffed. I simply don't want to see him. Didn't you love him crazily back then? Knox was speechless. Didn't I fall in love with Michael after that? F***ck. Are you cheating on Finn? Knox was agitated. Monica rolled her eyes. Who's cheating on who? I'm the one being cuckolded now. Chapter 70. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Jean was drunk translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. At night, Jean went out to have dinner with Monica. George stayed at home. He did not want to go out again. His personality was rather dull, and he did not like to interact with people. Thinking that she could not avoid drinking at night, Jean did not force him. Jean changed into a casual outfit. She wore a white T-dot shirt, a short fishtail floral skirt, and a pair of white sports shoes. Jean casually tied a loose bun on her head, revealing her delicate little face and slender white neck. She was as beautiful as ever. She drove out and arrived at the high-class restaurant that Monica had mentioned. Under the guidance of the waiter, Jean walked into the private room. Monica was waiting for her in the private room. When she saw her, she was unusually excited. Jeannie, you're here. What's wrong with you and Finn? Jean asked straightforwardly. The smile on Monica's face was a little stiff. Can we not talk about him? Isn't this the reason you called me here? Who said that? I simply asked you to come and drink with me. I'm not a good drinker. What does that have to do with anything? As long as you're by my side, it's fine. Monica hugged Jean's arm intimately. You don't even know that during the 7 years you've been away, I haven't been able to find anyone to confide in. I don't even have anyone to accompany me. My parents might seem open-minded, but they don't know anything about my relationships. Actually, it was not only Monica who compromised with Jean easily. Jean also compromised with Monica very easily. Her heart was slightly moved. I'll accompany you tonight. I know you're the best. Monica smiled unusually. Cunningly. The two of them sat at the dining table. It was a huge table. There was a lot of food and wine. Just as the two of them were eating, someone suddenly knocked on the door. The waiter quickly went forward and opened it. Monica. From the door came a familiar male voice. Jean and Monica turned their heads at the same time. Knox, why are you here? It was Monica's somewhat exaggerated scream. I accompanied Fourth Master Swan here for a meal. I heard from the front desk that you're here too, so I came over. Is Fourth Master Swan here too? Monica asked. I'm here. Following the voice, the person outside the door walked in. Since we met by chance, let's have a meal together. Monica was very enthusiastic. The words that were about to come out of Jean's mouth were swallowed just like that. What a terrible friend. Obedience is better than politeness. Fourth Master Swan agreed immediately. Monica hurriedly called out, come and sit. Edward very naturally sat next to Jean. Knox sat next to Edward. After sitting down, Knox took the initiative to look at Jean. Ms. Lawrence, what a coincidence. In the end, Jean was still a little awkward. She smiled. What a coincidence to meet 3 times in a day. It's fate. Knox smiled mischievously. Jean did not reply. She thought, ill fate. Where's Finn? Knox was not feeling awkward. He asked Monica, pretending that they had only met by chance indeed. He doesn't have time for us now, so don't ask about him. I'm here to drink tonight. Knox, do you dare not go home without getting drunk? Monica directly changed the topic. It's not that I don't dare. I'm afraid that I'll still be sober when you're drunk. Who gave you the courage? How dare you boast so shamelessly? Monica was full of fighting spirit. Come, I'll show you what it's like to be a good drinker. Come, come. The two of them started to drink. They drank like crazy. Jean ate dinner quietly. Edward also ate his dinner quietly. Aren't you busy? At the dining table, Fourth Master Swan suddenly spoke. Jean paused for a moment before she said calmly, can't you see I'm busy entertaining Monica? Fourth Master Swan smiled and took the initiative to raise his wine glass. Cheers, Ms. Lawrence. Jean did not want to drink. She originally wanted to say that it was inconvenient, but the wine glass in front of her that was filled to the brim by Monica gave her no reason to refuse. Jean raised her wine glass. Cheers, Fourth Master. Then, she downed the wine in one go. Edward downed the wine in one go as well. Ms. Lawrence, you're a good drinker. Knox and Monica drank a few rounds. Seeing the way Jean drank, they hurriedly raised their wine glasses as well. I want to have a drink with you too, Ms. Lawrence. Jean did not refuse. Tonight, she was here to vent with Monica. She did not want to ruin the atmosphere. She and Knox drank a few glasses of wine. Monica saw that Jean did not reject anyone. She was a good drinker, so she drank with Jean as well. In the room, everyone drank quite a lot. Monica was a little drunk. Jean had been drunk for a long time. Her alcohol tolerance was not very good. She actually did not drink much. It was obvious that she had exceeded her limit tonight. She went to the washroom. When she came out, she directly bumped into a man's embrace. The person's chest was as hard as iron. Jean stood up straight and rubbed her nose. She raised her head to look at Fourth Master Swan, who was looking down from above. "Why do you keep haunting me?" Edward frowned slightly. "Move aside. I'm going to accompany Monica." Jean pushed the man in front of her. The man did not move. "It's late. I'll send you back, Miss Lawrence." No, Jean was very determined. "I agreed to accompany Monica properly tonight. I can't just leave like this. Knox will accompany her. Knox can't control his lower body. Letting him accompany her is like letting a wolf into a tiger's den. Don't worry. Knox knows his limits. Why should I listen to you? You're colluding together." Jean reeked of alcohol and was doubtful. Edward's gaze was deep as he stared intently at her blushing cheeks. He said, "Is this how you look when you're drunk?" Jean's eyes were blurred as she watched the person in front of her suddenly bend over and approach her. Her rationality still forced her to take a step back in self-protection. Nevertheless, she was suddenly hugged by someone. He was so strong that she was unable to move. She looked at Fourth Master Swan angrily. Fourth Master Swan's lips were close to her right ear. "If you keep acting like this, I can't help but." His voice after that was so soft that only they could hear what he said. Jean's face suddenly turned red. Just as she was about to push him away, Fourth Master Swan lifted her up. Jean instinctively hugged the man's neck, afraid that she would fall to the ground. Edward carried Jean and left the private room. "Knox, take good care of Ms. Cardellini." "Okay." Knox agreed immediately. Monica watched helplessly as Jeannie was carried away by Fourth Master Swan. Many explicit images appeared in her mind. She stood up from the chair and was about to rush out the next second when Knox grabbed her. "What are you doing?" "I'm going to snatch Jeannie back." Monica was unusually agitated. "I can't disregard my sister's innocence." "Have you forgotten that you're trying to set them up?" Knox reminded her. "As an experienced person, I have to tell you that this method is direct and effective." Monica was shaken. "Damn. Would I be struck by lightning for tricking my best friend?"